With us again for the second. This is the second of the 4 days of the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum. Good morning and welcome to us in the studio today. I'm Donald Taylor. I'm the chair of the Learning Technologies Conference. It's great to have you with us. I'll introduce our speakers shortly. Firstly, let me just introduce the other sessions that we have taking place today. We've got at 12 o'clock, Turning Curiosity into Real-World Business Growth, and that's Dominic Holmes from Cornerstone On Demand. Obviously, the link between curiosity and business growth, crucial in learning and development. Then at 2 o'clock UK time, we've got Sven Becker from IMC Learning, Faster and Better, Transforming Your E-Learning Creation Strategy. So 2 great sessions coming up this afternoon. In fact, we have 3 great sessions every day on the 4 days of the Autumn Forum. The next 2 days, by the way, will be Tuesday and Thursday of next week. But today, our session is going to be AI for L&D, practicalities beyond the hype. I know this is a session that is going to really get people going. There's so much interest in AI at the moment. There has been since the end of November last year when ChatGPT went public. Because there's so much interest, of course, my job as the host is going to be monitoring the chat. If you've got a question, because we'll have question and chat going on, please could you put the question in the question tab on the right-hand side of the screen. So please put the question tab. That will enable us to keep track of the questions, and I will save those to the end, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end with our speaker, who I'm going to introduce right now. Delighted to have with us our speaker today, Egle Vinauskaite, who is an award-winning learning innovator, and she helps blue-chip companies and edtech startups and advises them. I think it's fair to say Egle is driven by business realities, by behavioral science. She's got great product development expertise, but above all, she is interested in evidence and what's really happening rather than just grand theories. Egle, great to have you with us. I'm really looking forward to this session. There's a lot of excitement. It's probably about an equal amount of fear, FOMO, and uncertainty around AI at the moment. What if there's one thing people take away from this session, Egle, what is it?
Yeah, so I would say don't freak out. You're not behind. Of course, we are online, we're on LinkedIn, we see that people are talking about AI all the time. However, not a lot of people are actually going all in, people and organizations. Obviously, right. In learning, just like in any business function, everyone's trying to figure out what to do with it. The majority of people are just at that experimentation stage. We still don't have very clear best practices, but what we do have, some of the things that people are coalescing around, some of the use cases is what we're going to be talking about today, as well as some of the blockers and barriers that people are experiencing so that you can perhaps chart an easier path for your organization as well today.
So if people are excited about AI, but also uncertain about it, they should stick around. They'll have some idea at the end of this session in an hour's time. They'll have an idea of what people are actually doing, and they'll have presumably some tips on how to go further forward without necessarily having to, I don't know, do some of the things we read about in the press, which seem to represent an extraordinary future with AI. It's possible to take smaller steps towards that. Is that fair?
Definitely. And
Cool.
That's, I think, how we should go about it.
Right. Well, I'm going to shut up because you're the expert, and I'm going to step to one side, get my head down, focus on that question tab in the chat, and hand it over to you. Egle, over to you.
Thank you, Don. Well, hello everyone. Good to have you here, choosing to spend your morning. I'm willing to bet this is not your first session about AI. So I'm not going to go into the details about the basics, what an AI is, what an ML is, what ChatGPT can do. What I'm going to do in this session, I'm going to look into the reality on the ground. What is going on, what people are doing, what problem and what solutions they may have found already. So without further ado, the first question, chapter 1, what's going on? The perpetual question of the last 11 months, I would say. And I'm going to spend probably 2/3 of this session exactly exploring this question. And then after that, we're going to go into the barriers, and that's going to explain why we are where we are. And I'm going to finish with some people for you to follow and some perhaps tips on how to keep up. So it's not going to be surprising for you that L&D has been powered by AI for a while. And I think that's part of where the confusion is coming from. Why is this the big deal? What's happening right now that is so different? Because we have had for years personalized learning paths, adaptive learning platforms, project matching, mentor matching. Some really impressive skills intelligence solutions are coming out as well. But what exactly happened 11 months ago? And if you look at it, there was this shift in November 2022. And personally, I feel it in a way that when I look at my talks even 3 months ago, they're obsolete, and I have to update at least half of each of them. And ever since November 2022, what's been going on is this generative AI prompting experimentation, focus on content. But why is it such a big deal? And that is for 3 reasons. Like, the first one is that in November, we experienced a qualitative breakthrough with GPT 3.5. If you remember, the first time you used it, it was really awe-inducing. Right now, we're kind of used to its so-called magic. Then it was really such a wow thing to experience, nothing that we had experienced before. So that's first. The second one is general purpose. Unlike the other AIs, this little bot could help you do anything from analyzing a huge data set to summarizing a document to talking about any topic with you whatsoever. And finally, the intuitive interface, this conversational interface that made sure that adoption was lightning fast. And I'm sure that going forward, that's going to affect the UI of applications, not just learning applications, and all applications that we use in our daily lives that affect our expectations from learning technology, just based on this conversational interface. So in short, AI went from being a fun little thing to a useful tool, from experimental to promising and actually useful. And because generative AI specifically is so content focused, it's such a leap in content production, it was clear it would have massive implications for our industry. So that's what we have been trying to figure out in the last almost a year, could you believe it? And that's where we are today. And what's going, I was trying to think about, can I make any predictions further than a few months ahead? And I realized that I probably shouldn't. But where we are going, the direction we're going in is skills practice, analytics, co-pilots, supporting strategy and not just content development, things like that. So a lot of interesting things coming up. But let's get back down to earth. You've probably noticed that there's lots of talk about AI at various levels, because you can find this prompt and guide about creating a specific quiz question, multiple choice for an instructional designer, and then you have this conversation about using AI for strategic reskilling. So I think it's helpful to have a framework that would help us communicate which level of use of AI we're talking about. And this is the framework that I propose and I have personally found useful, which is that there are 4 levels of AI impact in L&D. So we have content, we have skills development, because we all know that content and skills development is not the same thing. Then we have learning strategy, and finally business strategy. All of that underpinned by administrative support and internal communications. So if we look at it step by step, within content, we have three things. We have content production, we have content curation, and we have performance support. So with content production, frankly, as you've probably seen, AI eliminates or accelerates huge chunks of this work and is getting increasingly better, especially with visual content. With content curation, we have been doing that for a while in L&D. It's getting better, but it's not new at this point in time. And with performance support in the flow of work, this is where I think huge gains might happen for L&D going forward. However, at this point, these information lookup applications, and what I mean by performance support is when a person can look up what they need to answer their questions to help them unblock themselves and continue with their work. This is something that is, I would say, a holy grail in learning, and this is something that we have a promise of, but as of right now, not quite executed well. The next step, skill development, is about learning experience design. So this is really a case of developing skills, practicing skills, coaching, things like that. Because as we know, there's a difference between content and skills. And so far, when it comes to skill development, especially if we think about non-classroom training, so far we have used proxies for actual practice. So we would use branching scenarios with multiple choice questions because people could not use their natural language to participate in scenarios and to facilitate learning transfer. So right now, to be honest, not lots is going on at the moment, but there's a lot of experimentation with all sorts of coaching applications, bots, practical conversation simulations, as we're going to see. But this is where we have some of the most powerful tools coming up in terms of what I think is going to potentially change the way we develop skills in corporate settings. Finally, learning strategy. We have here things like skills intelligence, data-informed decision-making, and learning strategy support, all enabled by AI. And finally, business strategies, this another layer, which is, so far, I haven't seen that happening a lot, but I do think that as all business intelligence systems get increasingly integrated, L&D might be able to finally start crunching some data, seeing what's happening, if there is any impact, what influence it has on the organization, and so on. And finally, supporting AI adoption at the organizational level, which is not adopting AI in learning, but the flip side of that, which is the organization is adopting AI. How can L&D support that AI-enabled business strategy of the entire organization to help it stay competitive? So now that we have the four levels, let's be honest that most action in L&D right now is taking place at the bottom levels, especially content. So let's look into what's going on. And before we go into this, there is some context that a few weeks ago, Don and I launched a global sentiment survey focused on AI, where we asked learning professionals to tell us how they're using AI, among other things. The results are coming out in several weeks, so this is not an official overview. However, what I'm going to show you is partly informed by the survey. And the next part, the other part is my own research and my own observations from speaking with a lot of people in the last half a year. So let's get in. If we sketched out the learning experience design process, roughly, it would look like this. So we have this discovery part, understanding what it is that we are doing, audiences, what the problem is about, what the content is about, that sort of thing. Then the next step is strategy and design, which is, okay, so what is this solution? What is this intervention going to be? So this is more strategic, I would say, learning design, right? The next one is delivery. So how do we execute on that design. And this is where we have content production and so on. And then after that, we have follow-up, which is measurement, evaluation, continuous improvement, and things like that. So this is what theoretically the high-level learning experience design process should look like. Now, if we looked at how people are using AI across this process, it would look something like this. So we have some discovery, AI used in for some discovery. We have more use in learning strategy and design. We have a huge bump over delivery, and then little action with follow-up and evaluation, which probably resembles what has been happening with this process even before the AI. So this makes sense. We have been spending a lot of time on content production and definitely not enough time on discovery and evaluation. But here's the thing, when people say that they're using AI to generate content, they mean different things. And what I'm going to do now is take you through the process step by step, discovery, strategy and design, delivery, follow-up, and see what common practices are forming in our profession. Not best practices yet, but common practices, and what ideas are bubbling up as well, where we can find opportunities to use it better. Because if there's one thing we have probably learned about AI is that the limit is at this human ingenuity and the direction that we give AI. So this is something that hopefully is going to be useful for you. So with AI-enabled discovery, what's going on is that, oops, sorry. Most of discovery that's being done is initial content research and topic background, meaning that a lot of people, when they have to create training or learning experience about a topic, when it comes to discovery, most of what they use AI for is to pretty much look up what the topic is about. Now, when I look at some of the edge cases, some of the more interesting ideas in terms of how to make the discovery more useful, here's what I find. Using AI not just for initial content lookup, but for exploring the nuance and different perspectives in content. So meaning that I'm asking AI not just to give me what I need to know about a specific topic, but also asking, okay, so what are the different perspectives in this topic? Under what circumstances would this concept work? So that kind of deeper dive into the content. Another use case is creating user personas, because this is something that notoriously in L&D we often don't have a lot of access to. We don't have often access to the end user who's going to be hopefully benefiting from our intervention. And where AI comes in is that you can actually, with the little information that you have, you can try approximating what that persona might be and tap into the collective knowledge of the web to use AI to help you know that person better, know that what we call learner, user better, so that you can understand what their pain points are. Because what persona helps you do is helps you understand what does this person care about? What does their day might look like? What are their pain points? What do they prioritize? Anything from practical to what matters to them in general at work. And I'm sure that you understand how important that is when it comes to actually creating an effective learning intervention that is both relevant and presented in a way that the person finds easy to access. Then another one is understanding required knowledge and skills, meaning that once you have a specific problem, a specific performance needs that you need to help people with, you can use AI to actually interrogate that and better understand what kind of, so we have this kind of person, we have this kind of organizational problem, what is the required knowledge and the required skills that people are that people need to actually be able to perform that behavior that we want our intervention to help perform. So doing this often overlooked step early on. And finally, generate creative research ideas. This is something that I've seen a few people do, where again, a lot of the times we're constrained in terms of what we can do, especially in organizations where access to people is difficult. But it might not work 100% of the time, but if you input your constraints, AI might be able to give you some avenues to explore you haven't thought of to better understand your end users. Now, moving on to AI-enabled strategy and design. The common practice right now is using AI as a brainstorming buddy, meaning, okay, so what content can we use? And what kind of learning activities should we include in the experience? A lot of people are using AI to create a high-level course outline, and then specifically for general objectives, quiz questions, and writing out scenarios. So this is something that a lot of colleagues are doing. Now, when it comes to how to do it a little better, how to take one step further, I would suggest from some of the other practices that I've seen here and there is that instead of using AI as a brainstorming buddy, you can use it as a sparring partner. So the difference is that the brainstorming buddy is a one-way street. You ask AI for some ideas about what to do. You may interrogate it a little bit, but pretty much you leave it there. A sparring partner is a two-way street. So, for example, if I could ask a brainstorming buddy, what negotiation frameworks are out there? What activities can I do to help people learn them? With AI as a sparring partner, you can say, here's my description of a framework, of a negotiation framework. How would you use it in this situation? Is it explained clearly? How should I, or you made a mistake here in solving the situation with this framework. How should I explain this to you so that it is clear? How should I think about this concept? And here's my design. Give me feedback. So this is a way of using AI in this design process as a two-way street, as a sparring partner. Another really interesting use case is personalized feedback. And here what I mean is using this capability of AI to actually feed back on people's natural language. Right now, it's mostly used as text, but I'm sure voice and even videos coming soon. So what I mean here, instead of giving a multiple choice question, you can integrate AI in the back end of, for example, Storyline or Adapt or whatever authoring tool you're using. And you can give people personalized AI-created feedback on whatever they input as their answer. What that means in practice is that instead of constraining people to a few answer options and in a way leading them on, you can see how people are answering questions. You can later see what the knowledge gaps are, but in the moment, you can actually give people feedback on exactly on their thinking process, not the thinking process you kind of structured them into. Another really great use case of using AI in strategy and design, which is something quite simple but is often overlooked, is using AI to create relevant examples, metaphors, case studies, and projects that help people learn that specific skill that you're trying to make them learn. So instead of asking for content, digging deeper and asking, okay, so what kind of project would help someone learn the skill, right? What kind of metaphor should I use in the context of delivering training or a learning intervention for a legal professional? What would they understand, right? Specifically, what kind of case studies can I find to illustrate this concept, like real life case studies? So that kind of use is very powerful and helps you personalize a learning experience without using sophisticated content targeting and personalization at the sort of content curation, adaptive pathways level. So just in the design, you can actually make it really quite personal. And finally, simulated conversations. This is something that I'm super excited about. This is actual skills practice. And it's not happening a lot. And whatever simulated conversations as a learning tool, wherever they're happening, they are at the experimental stage for various limitations that we can discuss later on. But there are some really interesting use cases emerging for simulating sales and customer support conversations, and for simulating different line manager conversations. So keep an eye on that, and this is definitely an area to explore. And I think this is one of these things where if we play our cards right, AI can help us move from content provision to actual meaningful, deliberate skills practice. Now, when it comes to delivery, this is where we had the hump, and people, not surprisingly, are using AI extensively for pretty much 5 things: writing copy, well, this is quite obvious; for translation into multiple languages; for creating videos, mostly talking heads; for creating voiceover, so audio only to voiceover, say, slides or explainers; and for creating images. Now, these are all good practices. Obviously, the quality of the output will differ vastly based on your prompts and your ability to refine it. However, when it comes to how some L&D departments are using AI at the delivery stage, there are some interesting things coming out. The first one being how they work with SMEs. So what they do is that they use AI to simplify the technical content that they get from SMEs, so that it's easier for learning designers and non-subject matter experts to quickly understand the lay of the land. Another way it's working is that they're asking AI to rewrite content for different levels of expertise. So you might have your SME content might be quite clear. However, you may want to layer it and say that, okay, so at the expert level, we're going to use that much of SME content. We're going to make it that much technical. AI, write it in this way. Then we have another audience, which is intermediate, and another, which is a beginner. So we are manipulating that content for various levels. So it's not just asking to write copy on a topic. Another use case is, I was quite surprised there wasn't more of it, was extracting information from documents, meaning that if you have something that is 20 pages long, feeding it into AI and seeing what insights it can extract for you, asking it to prioritize the information in reports and log documents, and finding what the useful snippets that you can quickly put into your overall content and in the intervention without spending too much time. Another interesting use case was role-based content. This is a practice that I heard about, where in one organization the person is using AI to take the same content but write it in a way that is applicable to different roles. So depending on what you do, whether you are front end, back end, if you work with people, if you work in the office. So rewriting, for example, procedures, some content just based on role, and making it that much more relevant. And finally, writing facilitation notes. This is often overlooked, but writing facilitation notes for even face-to-face delivery takes a lot of time, and there have been really good results in terms of when people tried asking AI to create facilitation notes based on whatever content they were planning to deliver in the session. So finally, the sad one is AI-enabled follow-up, evaluation, measurement. And the sad thing is that there isn't a lot of common practice here. Not a lot of people in learning are using AI yet for anything that might happen after delivering a learning experience, learning intervention solution, whatnot. However, there are interesting ways you can use AI that some people are using without having access to a lot of, say, quantitative data. Because one thing you can do is you can finally crunch qualitative feedback, which is just, again, I'm trying to emphasize that now you can finally make use of the open input in for example, your feedback surveys, and use them to extract two things. First, impact, to see if the way people are answering questions has perhaps gives you any sort of indication in terms of maybe how their thinking has changed, right? And the other way to use that would be for improvement, to actually use feedback surveys and see what you can make of them. Because before, it was quite a bit of what I would see is that a lot of people would extract some quotes from feedback surveys, but they wouldn't really be able to do anything at scale. If you have 500 respondents with open-ended feedback fields filled out, there wasn't really a lot that you could do without spending a lot of time tagging all of these responses. So now you can feed it to AI and see, okay, so what are the key themes emerging? And finally, you can use it to give you actual suggestions for improvement. And finally, start closing this loop after completing a learning experience to actually iteratively improving it. Now, aside from the process that we just overviewed, I think it's important to mention that AI-driven content curation and adaptive learning are also used quite widely, but obviously because they're often used through a third-party tool, I didn't include it in the main design process. And when it comes to things like coaching, any kind of skills practice, creative solutions, these are still at a very experimental stage. And I know I've seen a lot of talk about various coaching bots and apps that help you learn a skill really fast, really get to grips with the topic really fast. But so far, everything, especially in organizational context, everything is really quite experimental, and no one that I know of is actually using that at scale. Pilot is as far as people have gotten with these things. So this is where we are with content and skill development. Now, when it comes to learning strategy, this is something that we don't talk about enough in learning because we are so focused on what AI can do to help us create learning experiences and executing them and producing content for them. However, I have observed some really interesting use cases for AI when it comes to learning strategy. One of them being doing a gap analysis. So using AI to understand the gaps in your learning or just the general employee support provision. Another one is mapping training requirements to job roles. And this is something that now with AI, with some clever use of it, you can do without having sophisticated software, at least for now. And the final use case that I saw that was really quite interesting was using AI and being in conversation with AI, trying to connect business strategy to learning strategy. So looking at, okay, so this is what the business is doing. How can learning support the business? Both in terms of any KPIs and goals that the business might have, any aspirations in terms of the behaviors, culture, whatever. So just checking it all in and seeing what you can get out in terms of what part learning can play in your specific context, in your specific organization. And finally, the last but not least, because definitely there's this one makes people very happy because it saves a lot of time, administrative support and internal communications. So just to give you a few examples of what your colleagues are doing with administrative support, They're using it to summarize documents, write emails and reports, create event agendas, learning event agendas, writing role descriptions if they are hiring people, and writing survey questions for any kind of L&D feedback surveys, that sort of thing. I was also quite pleasantly surprised by how much uptake there is in using AI for internal communications. So aside from writing L&D communications, I mean, so aside from writing various blogs and posts and newsletters to communicate what is happening in L&D and what your learning function is doing in the organization, some people have used it for describing various learning initiatives internally. So exactly what kind of language do we use to get people interested in this, right? So the promotional part of it, and in creating the whole internal communication strategy, planning communications, both in terms of exactly what the schedule might be and what the exact output, the copy might be. So this is what our colleagues are doing across the industry. And I just want to finish this part with a few tips that apply to everything that I just described. So the first one would be to start with a problem to solve. And it is important, now that we have this potentially very powerful tool in AI, it is important to not scale what hasn't worked before. So I would encourage you not to get complacent in using AI just to do what you have always done in learning, which is, there are really good things. Yes, content is required, foundational knowledge is required, but think about what we couldn't do before, what we can do now. What are the problems that we need to solve? And now that AI can actually help us solve it meaningfully. And here I am thinking skills practice, tailored feedback, these sort of things. So what do we do with this newfound opportunity? And it is important, if we want to actually make the most out of AI, to use it with a purpose, to start with a problem to solve. The second tip is don't skip discovery. So I was alluding to it in the beginning here when I was talking about discovery. But it is important, especially now when we have our little AI friend, it is important that you have a good understanding of the problem and of your end user so that you're able to direct AI and in terms of how it can help you and what it should do for you. Because now you can do it in a more sophisticated way. You can, perhaps with some of the examples that I shared in the beginning, you can use AI to help you with discovery, but it is important that you take that time to do that discovery, because that's going to help you take advantage of AI across the entire learning experience design process later on. And finally, don't leave creative calls to AI. And I've seen, my God, AI can do really amazing things creatively. But here, I just want to draw your attention to the basics of what makes good copy, what makes good video content, and what makes a good image. So for example, even a talking head, right now AI makes it quite easy to create a talking head video, and the technology behind it is getting increasingly better. However, there are good practices behind a good talking head video. There are specific types of content that are suitable for that format. There is best practice around how long the cuts should be, right? Where it would work best in the overall experience. So things like that. So I would encourage you not to leave these creative calls to AI, and know what good looks like, and don't just let AI just run with it. Okay, I have 5 to 10 minutes left, which is I'll make it work. Okay, looking into the common barriers, I'm gonna try to move more quickly here. But I think this is an important part, because this is where a lot of people get a bit disillusioned, because they feel like, my God, everyone is doing all of these things in AI, and I am experiencing a blocker after blocker after blocker in my organization. And this, if that's how you're feeling, this section is for you, because there are two chunks of, let's say, barriers. One is roughly caused by how this technology works, and the other is by how people feel about it. And you're gonna hopefully see that it's not just you, and that there are many people experiencing the same things, and that you can perhaps reach out and ask for advice and try to figure out these problems together. So the first one, with technology barriers, we have three rough buckets of technology barriers. The first one is risk management. This is where under risk management, I put everything such as privacy and data security, compliance, copyright issues, all of these questions. Most organizations are trying to figure these things out. And it's probably, I would say, data security and privacy is the single biggest blocker, or most popular, most common blocker among all L&D professionals that stops them from using AI. So that's the first. The other one is technology limitations, and I think it is really quite important to understand that, especially if you haven't used AI that much and only use it in a very surface level, superficial way, is that the technology itself has limitations. The first thing is that it is various pieces of software are using AI, for example, even with data, with skills, taxonomies, and so on, but they are not connected. They are not very well integrated. Even an AI, which is not, if you just a simple piece of AI, some via API, that still needs integrating, and we're going to talk about that when it comes to cost. So that's the first limitation. Lots of software right now, they don't speak together. So if you're working in a large organization and you're using AI across various places, that does not come together quite as seamlessly as people would like. The second one is language. And those of us who use English in our work, we are quite blessed because there are other more niche languages that do not have that much training, didn't have that much training content to feed into machine learning models, and the outputs are not as good. So a lot of people outside of English-speaking countries, AI is good, but is not as good. And we have found that in our survey as well. Another consideration is that all of these prompt libraries that you might find on LinkedIn or in people's newsletters, a lot of them are in English. So there is this knowledge base being built, if you're an English speaker, about how to use AI in an effective way. However, if you're not an English speaker, you have to do that yourself. There is no copy paste, and you can translate the prompt, but as we know, turns of language affect the output a lot. So just keeping that in mind, that it is not right now ubiquitous outside of English-speaking, not just countries, perhaps outside of roles that require English speaking in English. Another consideration is that we have, you might have niche content, which is perhaps legal, perhaps very procedural, that AI is not that good on. Immaturity of solutions, they may not be integrating there too early, not in enterprise grade, you cannot integrate them into your enterprise systems. And then finally, we have this whole Western bias in the data sets and the information that AI draws from. So that might affect depending on what kind of content you're working on, that also might affect the output, and it is a big barrier for using AI in some cases. And finally, the cost. And the cost has three flavors. It is the cost of actual software licenses, the cost of tokens, and tokens are these credits that you use if you're connecting to something like OpenAI via an API. So that's the first monetary cost. The second type of cost is actually the development cost to integrate different pieces of software. So you can extract value. And the final one is what I call the time to efficiency cost. And this has turned out to be quite a big blocker for people cannot right now take advantage of AI, because for them, there's going to be, just like with any technology, a bit of a dip in productivity as you're trying to figure it out until you get much better. And that time, the cost of taking that time to get to efficiency with AI, this is something that a lot of people feel like they cannot right now afford. Now, when it comes to human barriers, and looking at the time, okay, Egle, you can do it in 5 minutes. Human barriers. The first one being company culture and individual factors. This is something that's coming up out a lot from my conversations, my individual conversations with people, as well as from something that was a theme in our survey, is that there is in some organizations, there's this perhaps a conservative tilt, resistance to change, resistance to new technology at the organizational level. And then at the individual level, there is both a lack of confidence, but also fear of doing something wrong. So this is, I think there are various flavors of fear. We talk a lot about the fear of losing your job, fear of changing your ways of working, but there's another type of fear, which is, yeah, I don't quite know what I can do with it, like what I'm allowed to do, right? So that's the first one. The second one is lack of trust in the output, and this is huge. So many people mention that, and this is a theme that I've been hearing from pretty much since last year, that trust is a huge thing, trust in the output, because we don't know what kind of information AI is drawing from. Can we trust the information that it's given us? So if we cannot trust it, how that's gonna, where do we get our efficiencies if we need this double QA process, right? And finally, we have 3 questions emerging that I just wanted to, well, I couldn't make them rhyme, beginning, exploiting, maintaining, but kinda, which is, I bet that each of you have at least one of these questions on your mind. Where do I start? How do I make the most out of it? And how do I keep up? And these are the questions that are stopping people from making the most out of AI. So obviously, where do I begin? One thing that's coming out quite strongly is that there's just so many tools. There's just this case of choice paralysis where I don't know, I kind of know what AI can do. I have no idea which tool to use, how to select it. I don't know what kind of use cases, like there's now thousands, tens of thousands of prompt examples. Which one do I even begin with? So that's the first one. Where do I start? Exploiting, how do I make the most out of it? So pretty much, I need inspiration. How can I make, what do I not know? What are the other people doing? And I think these kind of spaces where we can connect in communities of practice, where perhaps in the organization as well, you can create some sort of little spaces where people can share what they're learning, can share how they're using AI, and getting that knowledge sharing started. I think that's the way to address how do I make the most out of it. Because the truth is, there are no best practices right now. There are only common practices. And the common practices, they are not perhaps that inventive yet and that effective yet in terms of learning. So we are all figuring it out at the same time. And in terms of how do I keep up? There's just last night, there's this guy called Ethan Mollick, who I'm going to include into a list of people to follow. He's one of my favorite thinkers. And he is at the University of Pennsylvania, I think. And he is a researcher. He writes, his job is to look at latest AI research, understanding how it can be used. He writes about it. He participates in papers and research studies. He talks about it inside the industry, in the academia, and so on. And last night, he put up a post saying that I cannot keep up. It is too hard. Every time something new comes out, I have to edit like 20% of my presentations that I deliver. He delivers the same talk, at least from the way he describes it in the post. I deliver the same talk every time, but every time something new comes out, 20% of my presentation is obsolete overnight. And I think that if someone whose career, whose job is to follow what's happening in AI, struggling to keep up, I think all of us should stop beating ourselves up over it and find a way to pretty much get other people to do the job that helps us prioritize what to pay attention to and where to direct our attention. And before I go into who these people might be, I just wanted to share one last thought about all of these barriers that I talked about and how they all come together. It's becoming quite clear that just AI skill, as in how do I use ChatGPT and what kind of prompts I plop into it, that is not the problem. It's becoming clear that AI is going to be just like, or might be just like any technology, which is a behavior change. If you're asking people to adopt a new technology, you're asking them to change their behavior, to change their ways of working, to change their habits. So I think it is important to view AI adoption as a behavior change initiative that includes interventions at the individual level, that includes interventions at the tech level, and at the organizational context level and the perceived value of AI and so on. So that's my last thought on it. And I think just want to share the people who I deeply respect and I find very useful in following their work and their thinking. Ethan Mollick, for latest research. Detlef Hold, he does weekly roundups of useful L&D and AI-related reads. John Fletcher has unparalleled knowledge of using AI in enterprise settings. Philippa Hartman, AI and Learning, and Ross Stevenson does daily tutorials of AI tools for specifically aimed at L&D professionals. So go follow them. That's going to make that's going to make your life much easier. And that's that. Sorry, Don. I overran.
Egle, have a glass of water. Take a moment. We've had plenty of people in the chat say this is great. And I don't know why you're apologizing. You've covered a tremendous amount of ground. You've given people practical stuff to go away with. Yes, of course, we have too much to cover in the 6 minutes we have left in questions. But as we discussed previously, even if we had an hour, we wouldn't be able to cover all the questions on this. All right. I want to give a couple of shout outs very quickly, then we're going to jump into questions. I'm going to ask you, just gather your breath, Egle, and then we're going to jump into questions. Try and take like 20 seconds for each one so we can cover it all. Shout outs to people actually doing stuff with AI. So Darren Buckley, translating AI, using AI to translate mandatory language, mandatory training into plainer language has worked really well. Henrietta Klutz backed up Darren on that. Nicola Ridge saying, I've used it to suggest spaced practice has really helped. Nigel Payne and Liz Naylor talking about the value of Copilot from Microsoft Office. And actually, Liz Burton Hughes generally giving some very wise commentary, not cynical, but asking us to look at things from a really wise point of view. And also shout out to Egle. A lot of people saying they wanted some of your tips on a t-shirt, particularly don't scale what hasn't worked, and don't leave the creative calls to AI. So shout out to you as well, Egle. Right, let's jump into some questions. Henrietta says, how well is your data protected, even with a paid version? How do you make sure it is? Asking for feedback, using it as a sparring power also requires more intelligence. So anyway, how well is your data protected? That's the biggest question everyone wanted an answer to. Egle, you've got 20 seconds to come up with an answer.
Well, thank you. It took you longer than 20 seconds to ask the question. So with the paid version of ChatGPT, GPT-4, right? Like that's the question. How data is protected?
Yes, even with a paid
Pretty,
version, how well is your data protected?
it is. I'm going to be honest. It's not going to take 20 seconds. The thing is that data protection, data security is the main competitive battling ground for all applications, meaning that the security of the data is going to be where various models and AIs are going to be competing on. So this is something that is going to get solved. Right now, if you're inputting your data into GPT-4, it does go to OpenAI. So it does leave your, it's not your personal server. It does go to OpenAI. If you want data that stays within your company, which is something that a lot of enterprise customers want, then the solution is, from my conversations with people who understand that much better, is Azure. Using Azure, the cloud, Microsoft Cloud Service. It creates a separate instance for you.
Okay, you cut out there for a second, Egle. Just to summarise, create a separate instance using Azure Cloud Services is what you're suggesting. Yeah.
Well, they're not sponsoring me, but that's
No.
Azure. Yeah, Azure is the solution where your data stays with you. Anything you put into GPT-4, even the paid version, goes to OpenAI servers. And the data is further trained on that data.
And to be fair, Kay Archilla also said about hallucination. There's ways to minimise this if you're, and she suggested some ways to deal with that as well. So thank you. And I'm being flippant when I say you can summarise something so complex in 20 seconds. Liz Burton Hughes also raised a similar question about how do we validate the output of AI at the discovery stage. It's slightly different from the protection of your data, but it's a really important point. Liz Burton Hughes and lots of people want to know the answer to this. We're going through discovery. It's a great tool, but how do we know what we're getting makes sense? And there was a few other points about discovery as well. Let me just get to those. Olga said it can be much more powerful if you use AI. And Edwin said, why wouldn't you use your experts to use your discovery? Because AI lacks the context. So can you talk about how we could use AI effectively and trust the results during the discovery phase?
Okay, so it's not one or the other. Definitely, if you have access to experts, use that. The problem with experts is that when it comes to the content side, experts are really knowledgeable, and you can, of course, trust them, like we have done for years. However, when it comes to understanding your user, the persona you're creating training for, they're perhaps for example, if you're a vendor, your L&D manager who you're communicating with and who is sponsoring the project may not know the daily lives of the people in that position. Like it is about gaining empathy. Let's put it like that. It's about discovery. The discovery is about gaining empathy for the people you're creating for. And you may not have met those people. However, there might be a lot of information online about these people, and you can use AI to get to know them better, right? And of course, and this is something that experts cannot really do, because usually, even if you have done any user research in a real life setting, you would see that people who say that they know how that target audience is going to behave, when you speak to someone from that target audience, you realize that there are nuances in people's motivations and what's happening, like their thought processes, what's happening in their minds that other people cannot really convey. Not saying that AI can do the whole thing, but it can definitely perhaps get you closer if you're working with an audience that is not too niche. And in terms of how to validate the outputs, I mean, as with everything, you need to use common sense. Just like how you validate your outputs when you do discovery
Yes,
in real
true.
life, you never know. Is your sample representative? Have you spoken to the right people? Your research design. So it is using common sense.
So we keep the human in the loop, which is not my phrase, but it's a commonly used phrase in this field, and it just expresses, doesn't it, very well that idea that, well, to come back to your point, we can't. AI is a great tool, but it is a tool. My clock, which I always use, says it is now time in the UK, and I could cry because we've got such great questions to get through here. Egle, perhaps you and I can, at some point, of course, all have so much time in our lives, have a look through those questions and try to, perhaps we could do something to answer some of them, because I think there's people are raising really valid, interesting points here, and they are definitely worthy of consideration. The good news is that this chat, the questions do stay here. I'm going to just put those links back into the chat, which of course is links to all those people Egle said to follow, because it's the end of a presentation. It is hopefully not the end of a conversation. Stay in touch with Egle, stay in touch with all of these people, definitely on LinkedIn, because it is impossible to keep up with everything, but you give yourself a chance if you follow these people. Egle, I'm going to just wrap up in a moment, but do you want to say anything finally as a word of inspiration? I hope you said at the beginning, don't freak out. That was your beginning phrase. What's your phrase to wrap up at the end, Egle?
Start with a problem. It's going to solve a lot of your problems in terms of where do I begin? How do I use it? What's the best use for it? Just start with what are the most acute problems right now in our learning function, organization, whatever, and then explore how you can use AI for it instead of we have AI, what do we do with it?
And you know what I like best about that phrase? A. Start with a problem, not every problem, not the whole universe, which is where this whole freaking out thing comes from. Start with a problem and see what you can do with that. Oh my! Thank you, everybody in the room, for so much interaction, chat, thinking, reflections, talking about how you're using it, and of course, thank you to Egle Vinauskaite, who has done such a great job marshalling all these things, putting it into context for us, and delivering a great webinar today. Egle, thank you so much.
Thank you.